Here tonight. Thank you for joining us for our City Council meeting. My name is Nicole Martin, Councilwoman Martin. I am acting as pro tem tonight because, as you can see, our mayor is out of town. He will be trying to call in, perhaps at some future time when he actually lands. So if he does, we will patch him in. I wanted to take a minute before we get going and welcome Sheriff Rivera. Thank you so much for joining us. And Under Sheriff Carver, right here in the front row, and then Mayor Silvestrini from Mill Creek. As you all know, and what has brought many of you out tonight, we will be discussing our relationship with Unified Police Department. So we're very appreciative that you would join us here tonight, and as well as all of the rest of you. So with that said, I would like to invite Abby Edwards to come up and give us our pledge.
Would everybody please rise? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
One additional note that was brought to my attention, one question that we had received. We typically, as many of you know, have our council meetings on the second and fourth Wednesday of each month. Back in April, when we were putting together our budget schedule, we recognized the fact that we would not have a quorum next week, and at that time in April scheduled this meeting to ensure that we could keep our budget on schedule. Hence the reason that this is on an off night, just because that's how we scheduled it in April. So just to clarify why this is not on our normal second and fourth. And then now's the time when we would disclose if any council members have any conflict of interest on any item on the agenda tonight.
None for me.
Okay. All right, Mayor and Council, do you have any comments or recognitions for us today?
I have none.
Okay, seeing none, we are now to the public comment section of our agenda. And if I could just clarify, as you can see, if you have an agenda in front of you, the typical public comment is for any item that is not on the agenda. So if you're here to speak to an item that is on the agenda, we'd ask you to hold it until that item. In particular, as I said, we know that many of you are here for 6.2, and we will have a presentation when that item comes up. And then we would welcome as many of you that would like to speak to come up at that time. And I do have two comment forms from Mayor Silvestrini and then from Sheriff Rivera. Would you like to comment now, or would you like to hold your comment to keep with the item as we've discussed? Mayor? Okay, thank you very much. We will get you soon. All right, so let's move on through our agenda. We have, oh yeah, thank you. Good point. So now that I've made that long speech, are there any public comments that are not on items that are on the agenda? We'd invite you to come down now. Okay. No one's really excited to come up, so we will move on. Thank you very much. Item 3, Mayor and Council Board and Committee reports. Any tonight?
My reports will be 6.2.
Okay. Sherry?
I'll just report on the youth council meeting we had. We actually met with Quit Trippin. I discussed that a little bit. Our last meeting, their meeting was Thursday, and it was a great meeting. It's focused on suicide prevention and help these kids be able to recognize it in their schools and start. There's some legislation that they're proposing at the state legislature to try and get some social health programs in the school, teaching kids how to interact better with one another and just engage societally so that we can maybe move away from the direction that we've been headed in, which is not good for our youth. And so the purpose of it was to train these youth who are community leaders and leaders in their school to be able to take that message back and maybe help ease some of those things that are happening in our community right now.
I might just take a moment. I had the occasion to join staff and the mayor in DC last week and wanted to mention some of the, what I would categorize as wins for Herriman City. As many of you may or may not know, we've received to date $12.9 million in our effort to preserve the mountain, which is in keeping with what we realized our residents wanted at the last election. It came to our attention that there was some legislation perhaps that would preclude us from receiving any more money. So we met with the appropriate agencies and are working on a fix that will make sure that we at least are remaining eligible for that money, and we can continue in what really is a strategic long-term plan to continue to preserve that mountain. And so as a result of our meeting, we entered that meeting with an anticipated $2 million allocation to us to put towards additional parcels of land. After that meeting, we had increased that to $10 million that would be targeted to our area. So a significant amount of money that, again, will ensure that we preserve the open space that's very important to our residents. Secondly, I might say that we've had EPA cleanup issues that we've been trying to deal with for 20 years and made some significant progress in that area as well. Got two significant meetings and were able to sort of move in a direction which is, honestly, just having a direction was really positive because we've been relatively stymied on the cleanup that we feel is absolutely necessary and ought to be done for our area. So both of those big successes for us. So with that, let's go to our reports, and I would invite Destiny Skinner, who's our communications specialist. There she is. She'll be talking about the Youth Council Utah State University Leadership Conference report.
Good evening, Council. I just wanted to introduce actually the Youth Council. They'll be the ones reporting. As you know, we had the opportunity to go up to Utah State University in March for the State Youth Council Leadership Institute. So with that, I'll turn the time over to Abby Edwards and Lauren Christensen.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Destiny said, my name is Abby Edwards. I'm the recorder for Herriman City Youth Council. I'm here to report on the Youth Council's recent opportunity to attend Utah State's Leadership Conference. The conference has had and will continue to have many great benefits to the Youth Council, including lots of team bonding. So it brought us a lot closer as a Youth Council and made it so that we are much stronger and we have a lot more in common. Also, we had a lot of unique service opportunities that we probably couldn't have had anywhere else. We cleaned up schools in Logan. Also, I personally had an experience. We helped out at a horse ranch for underprivileged girls, and we cleaned up the stables and helped them groom the horses. It was something that I will never forget. We also got to interact with other youth councils. There were groups that were pre-made by the people who organized it. They split up the youth councils into different groups so we could get to know people from other parts of the state, and we could learn from them and make new connections with other youth councils. We also got a lot of really great leadership training. There were a lot of keynote speakers. My personal favorite was speaking about how life is going to be hard and that's okay. And basically, he also taught us about leadership, how it's not always about the position, it's more about the disposition that you have while serving in the position. And it was really worth it because we learned a lot about how to become better leaders in our community, and it makes our presence known to the rest of the state, for Herriman City, and for the Youth Council. And it also keeps the youth of the city informed about government functions, so we know what's going on, because some youth do not know what's going on, and it's really nice to know what's going on. And with that, I thank you for your time, and the Youth Council would like to thank you for your continued support and letting us continue to grow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just share something really quick. I'm Lauren Christiance. I'm also a Youth Council member. At USU, we were able to listen to people who have been through hard things and hard times, and really taught me some really great leadership skills on how to work through these problems in their own lives. And it really hit home, and it was a really great experience for me to learn from these valued individuals. It was also a ton of fun. You know, they have a dance and a get together, and you get to know lots of other youth that have the same interests as you and want to be a leader in the community. And it was really great to interact with those and, like she said, do lots of service, and service is great. So I thank you for your time.
Destiny, those the only two. Okay, thank you so much. The Youth City Council is really important to us. We've seen it grow. We appreciate the time and efforts that you put into that. It's always a highlight to hear that, and thank you for your efforts, Councilwoman, on that as well. All right, we'll move on to our next report and welcome Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District, and I believe that Matt Olson will be giving the report. The ordering of this, if we could, we'll do the water conservation plan first, if you could, and then Matt will discuss proposed property tax increase, and then we'll have public comment on that issue. Thank you, Matt.
Let me break rank here real quick. My name is Brent Johnson. Some of you I know, have known for a long time, and some of you I haven't met yet. But I wear two hats here. Well, one hat particularly, one hat got me to where I am. I'm a Riverton City Council representative, councilman there in District 5, which put me in a position to be nominated by the governor to be a board of trustee for the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District. And so with that, by recent legislation, it's required that we come and introduce a proposed rate increase, which by law we need to. And actually Dave Martin will handle that part as far as the particulars of that. And then Matt Olson, who is our communications department, will handle how we can save money with conservation to pay for the slight increase. So if there's any questions or comments at that point, we can entertain those. But that's why we're here, is to fulfill the requirement required by law.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank the council for giving us this opportunity. I do have a presentation. Wow, that was great. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about water conservation today. Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District is a wholesale water provider primarily, and we do have a small retail area. However, we have 17 member cities and agencies that buy water from us, and Herriman is one of those agencies. Our engineers really love to show this chart. It's a little complicated, but the main thing I'd like to show here is it's our water supply and demand planning as we project into the future. We look at population growth and we look at our available water supplies. And ultimately what we've discovered is if we don't conserve water, we will not be able to manage and handle the demand that we expect to see in these fast-growing areas of Salt Lake County. We also believe that a lot of the water conservation that would be considered easier has been accomplished. And as we go forward, we're going to have to ramp up our efforts. This chart here shows our conservation progress since the year 2000. It shows it gallons per person per day in our service area. So in 2000, it was at 255, and we just compiled our numbers. We're at 207, which is a 18% reduction in water use. Our goal, however, by the year 2025 is to get to 25%, and we're starting to feel like that's getting difficult to manage. So really, when we talk about water conservation, it's focused in on these three concepts: education, incentives, and regulations. And the programs I'll be talking to you about today cover all three of those areas. When we look at conservation opportunities, we want to focus on the areas that will provide the best opportunity to save. And if you look at this, you can see that 40% of our water is used indoors, but a shocking 60% is outdoors. And you can even see that that short season that we use outdoor water, there's a large peak in water use. We find that outdoor water use is the best place for us to target in water conservation programming at this point. So what are we doing to partner together? Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District actually offers our member agencies and cities a grant program for $50,000 for water conservation programs and opportunities. We evaluate these proposals as they come in, and we bring them to our board and ultimately can approve this. These typically require a cost match, and the city is able to make these proposals. So this is a program that many other member agencies and cities have taken advantage of, and it's something that's available for Herriman. A big initiative that we're working on is something that we're calling Utah Water Savers. It's a website that allows mostly our residential water users throughout our service area to apply for rebates and programs. It's actually live today. Anyone here can actually go on there and check out some of these programs, but I'll just give you a quick summary of them. Ultimately, smart controllers and irrigation controllers is a great place to start. Smart irrigation controllers can be purchased with a 50% rebate up to $150. This program is one of our most popular ones, and many people are liking it because it can automatically adjust to weather conditions and turn off your irrigation system when it rains. Toilet replacement program is actually offered for homeowners with homes that are older than 1994 with high flush toilets. We'll offer up to $100 for people to get a low flow toilet, and that's also supported on Utah Water Savers. Flip Your Strip's a program where we're looking at that park strip. We find that it's a great place to start to move towards a water efficient landscape. A lot of people don't love their park strip. It's not a place that their kids typically go play, and in the heat of the summer, it's usually really ugly. You can see it's usually fried, and we think it's a good opportunity to flip that green grass park strip to water efficient landscaping, and we offer up to $1.25 per square foot for people that convert their park strips. Landscape consultations are a free consultation where we'll go to your home, look at your landscape design and your irrigation setup, and provide you with short-term and long-term recommendations. And as an add-on to that, Switch to Drip is a program where we'll allow you to, if a technician comes to your house, they see that there's a spot we can convert to drip irrigation, you can go back and get a $100 rebate to convert a spray zone to drip irrigation. And then finally, Localscapes University Rewards. Localscapes is a concept. It's a residential landscape design movement that's been going throughout Utah, and it's an exciting one, which focuses on many of the problems that people have with their landscapes and addresses many of the needs, in addition to high curb appeal, lower maintenance, and ultimately better water efficiency, and I'll talk about that more in a second. So this rollout plan, it's actually happening now. It's available to the residents of Herriman. It's separate from the member agency grant program. Jordan Valley Water will actually administer the program. There's no cost sharing with Herriman City, and ultimately the city can choose to opt out of any of those programs that I talked about. The one thing I'd say with the landscape consultations, we'd like to work with your utility billing group to get some water use information, so when we go on the consultation, we can show the resident how their water use is affecting their bill, and that's a good thing to usually show. And if you can promote these concepts to your residents, that'd be great as well. So that's mostly on the residential side. For businesses, for homeowners associations, for institutions, there's a landscape leadership grant that we offer. Really, it's showcasing water efficient landscaping projects. We feel like these are opportunities that many people will want to get an incentive to just go the extra mile to do the landscaping right. We also have created some best practices for water efficient landscaping. We have a toolkit for cities that talks about city ordinances, development agreements, and best practices for irrigation and maintenance, especially with water efficient landscaping. We actually also have a model landscape ordinance that can be used. So just quickly and finally to talk about this concept of localscapes. It's spreading throughout Utah. It's a lot of excitement. It's designed for Utah. It's designed to work with irrigation systems. We think that this style of landscaping is simple. It offers better curb appeal, more functionality in your yard, and ultimately lower maintenance and a simplified irrigation system. In Utah, we have a problem. We think of this extreme of landscape, which is all grass, and the other extreme, which is cactus, lava rock, and cattle skulls, the thing that most people look at and want to run away from. And that's what a lot of people think we mean when we talk about water-efficient landscaping. There's this nice middle ground that is available to us, and Localscapes really tries to hit that middle spectrum. Grass is not bad, it just needs to be put in the right places where it can be successful. There's a spectrum here. You can see grass on the one on the left. You can go more of the traditional xeric landscape on the right, but ultimately it's an approach that we think works well. Our outreach staff got a little creative with this one, and they looked at a typical Utah landscape. They called it a blandscape. Hopefully that's not offensive to any of us, but they look at that, and this is the before picture. This is someone that's actually gone through the localscaping process. Most people would look at that landscape and they wouldn't think, wow, that's water efficient. They look at that and they say, wow, that's a beautiful landscape. And ultimately, that landscape uses 2/3 less water than a typical Utah landscape, which is one reason why we feel like this is the direction we need to be moving to meet those demands that we talked about as our population continues to grow. So Localscapes University Rewards, it's a program we offer. We teach a class at our education center. If any of you are looking to do a new residential landscape or you're looking to renovate your current landscape, come to the class. We'll do a landscape plan review and ultimately give you cash rewards if you go through the localscaping process within 12 months. You can focus on your front yard, your backyard, your park strip, anything, and ultimately you can get some money for it. It's not enough money to get you to do it if you're not planning to do it, but it's enough maybe to get you to do it right if you're already planning on doing it. For example, we actually just had someone, quarter-acre lot, they did their front yard or backyard and just received $2,000 for their work. Obviously not enough to cover the cost of their renovation, but they were very pleased that they were able to get a nice landscape and also a plan review and then some cash rewards. So we encourage you to look into it. So just to conclude, consider promoting these programs to your residents, consider taking advantage of those grant funds that are available, and consider looking at those best practices for city ordinances and development agreements. And that's all I had to present today on this topic. So open to questions or discussion if you'd like to.
Thank you very much. That was the bright side. Now, Dave, you get the harder job.
Yes, good evening. I'm Dave Martin. I'm the Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer of Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District. Also a Herriman resident of 4 years, and I enjoy living here in this city. As Matt mentioned, water conservation is very important to us. By conserving water, it can delay very large and expensive water development projects that will also help keep the overall cost of water lower. As Brent Johnson mentioned, our trustee, the state legislature has given water districts the ability to levy a property tax. Jordan Valley has collected property tax since its beginning in the 1950s. Property taxes make up approximately 25% of Jordan Valley's overall revenue. As part of our proposed budget for the 2018-19 year, Jordan Valley is proposing a property tax increase from an estimated certified tax rate of $000,379 to $000,4. We believe that coming and raising property taxes, although not popular, we try to do it in smaller impacts than waiting years only to raise it a large amount. We issue water revenue bonds, millions of dollars in order to fund expensive water projects. And one of the requirements is we tell the rating agencies that we will levy a property tax and maintain as much at or near our maximum amount of $000,4. So as that certified rate erodes, we hold a truth in taxation hearing and raise that rate. So the estimated revenues from this property tax increase to Jordan Valley would be between $800,000 and $950,000. That's about a 5 or 6% increase. And on a home of $325,000 for a homeowner, that would be about $4 a year increase. Jordan Valley uses property tax as an important part of its financial plan. It's a stable source of revenue. It's helped Jordan Valley maintain or attain and maintain a AA+ bond rating, which has saved Jordan Valley millions of dollars in interest costs and has also helped keep that cost of water lower. It supports capital projects plan. We have a capital projects plan, a 10-year plan of $300 million to be spent over the next 10 years. And so the use of this property tax would be to help fund those expensive projects. One of the projects that we've completed or almost completed here in Herriman on 118 South, we built a pipeline from Herriman High out west to U111 that will help bring water to other areas of our boundaries and your boundaries. That was an $11 million project.
Unmuted. Muted. Unmuted.
There are two other very expensive projects that the Central Water Project, which was a new water source that we pay back to Central Utah Water Conservancy District, and we also built our own pipeline. And the Provo Reservoir Canal Enclosure Project was another very large, expensive project that will be needed to bring additional water, new water sources to Salt Lake Valley to support the growth. So the property tax would be to support all of those projects. Those are some of the highlights of those projects. And we plan, if our budget is approved, we would be holding a truth and taxation hearing in August to propose the tax increase before it's approved. And that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we will open this up to public comment at this point. Is there anybody here that would like to speak to the issues that have been raised from Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District? Open it. Open it.
Yeah, that's not a public hearing. Okay. It's just public comment.
All right. You did a fantastic job, and apparently there's no comments at this point, but thank you. And if we do have any comments, we would invite our residents to review what you see here in the packets, and if you do have any comments in the future, of course, we'll relay those to Jordan Valley Water. We appreciate your time here. Thank you. Oh yeah, and lastly, your offerings for water conservation, very exciting, so we'll make sure that we push those out through all of our channels and make sure our residents are aware of those. Thank you. Good? Not yet, okay. Okay, now we'll move on to item 5, which is approval of the consent agenda. So if there are any questions about the consent agenda, if not, I will accept a motion.
You guys have any questions? I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written. Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second and a roll call vote. Councilmember Henderson. I don't normally do this. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Orn.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
And I vote yes. That motion passes. It was my first time of doing that. How did it feel? Did it feel natural? All right, there's going to be more time. All right, we'll move on to item 6. 6.1, discussion and consideration of a proposed rezone for 1.125 acres for Jared Kelsch, located at approximately 13705 South, 7300 West, from A1 agricultural 1 acre to A.15 agricultural 0.15 acre minimum. And we have Michael Malloy, our city planner, to discuss that.
Thank you. As you know, this is a legislative item in that the Planning Commission has reviewed this item and has made a recommendation to the City Council for your consideration tonight. The Planning Commission held a public hearing, which was opened and closed. During that public hearing, we did not receive any public comment other than the applicant himself, who represented his interests at the meeting. This is a vicinity map just showing the location of this proposed rezone. Again, this is going from a A1 or 1 acre zone to essentially a half acre zone. There's both A1 and half acre zones within this particular neighborhood. Just zooming in on this property, you can see the property does have a single-family home. The intent is if this were to rezone, the property would be split into, the existing home would remain on the corner, and this would create a new parcel for a new single-family home in the neighborhood. The Planning Commission also heard a subdivision. The subdivision, though, of course, is contingent upon the city changing the zone. If you were to deny this application, then the subdivision cannot move forward. Because the subdivision is contingent on your decision as the legislative body, the Planning Commission voted to table or hold this subdivision pending the outcome of this meeting tonight. When this was reviewed and presented to the Planning Commission, we had recommended, the staff had recommended approval because the request, the zoning amendment request, is consistent with the city's general plan. In this area, the general plan says that a density of 1.8 units to 3 units per acre is appropriate. This request would be essentially 2 units per acre, so it falls within that range that is allowed under the current general plan. So based on the fact that the zoning request is consistent with the general plan, we also, through the subdivision review, have been analyzing the feasibility of this subdivision, and it meets the subdivision code, assuming that the zoning map is changed to facilitate this development. So again, staff had recommended approval. However, the Planning Commission had concern that in this particular part of the city, there have, of course, been interests of more agrarian uses. Larger lots are a pattern in this part of the city. And as an expression of the Commission's desire to try and maintain the existing patterns of development in this part of the city, they actually recommended denial, which was noted in your staff report. So their recommendation on this item is to deny the rezone request. I believe the applicant is here tonight to hear your decision, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have at this point in time.
So Mike, just to clarify, understanding that there would have to be a zoning change, obviously, to allow for the subdivision, but it would, at the application, it would be consistent with other developed land and lots that currently exist within that area.
Both A1 and A.5 is present in this neighborhood already. Yeah, and it's consistent with the general plan.
It doesn't appear, there don't appear to be any smaller lots, half acres on the east side of the road where this is located, though. Most of those seem to be on the other side. Is that right?
Yeah, and I apologize, I didn't include that graphic in this map, but in your packet you have the zoning map that shows where those 2 zones are present, yeah.
My biggest concern of not approving this is the simple fact that it meets the current zoning and is consistent with our general plan, which, you know, those are intended to provide essentially a roadmap of sorts for those that own property. So to have that in place and then do otherwise, to me, seems a little disingenuous.
And during our work session, we talked not about this project, but just in the general concept of, do we want to introduce maybe some different tools in this neighborhood and perhaps other neighborhoods where we want to try and preserve the existing larger lot patterns of the city? And it's staff's recommendation that we look at that very carefully as part of a future general plan amendment that we'll be starting this summer with the council's support and leadership. So yeah, we would suggest that that is an important element, but we need to study that more comprehensively rather than just on this individual parcel.
And to echo Councilmember Martin's comments, that would be my vision and hope is that, again, it's studied as part of our broader general plan update as we go through that process, but we don't try and take a concept and apply it without doing that study first to an individual application that comes through. While we've obviously had much discussion about zoning and corresponding density and the desire to continue to help decrease that density and preserve some of those larger lots that allow for those agricultural uses. Again, this particular application in front of us wouldn't impede any of those desires that have previously been expressed to, again, have those larger half-acre lots, to be able to continue to have those agricultural rights and uses available to it. And so, again, I would have concern of going against what our general plan and things currently state at this point until we further study that issue.
And I apologize, I should have clarified, the commission's recommendation was 4-2, so there was a split. It wasn't unanimous, but it was a majority position of the Planning Commission to recommend denial. So,
You mentioned existing patterns of development, and truly, when you look at this map, the areas that have been developed are the smaller lots, the A25. They're quarter-acre lots, not half-acre lots. And what he's asking for is a half an acre lot, which allows him to continue the current land use, so he can continue to have large animals on a half an acre. So it doesn't really change the use of the property. 1 acre, half an acre would still be consistent with large animal use, so he doesn't lose any of that. Where in the rest of the developments that you see here that are because the other neighbors on his east side have been there for a long, long time, other than you see at the top of the street on the east side. That's the new development there for Richmond Homes right there. And those are, once again, just the smaller quarter of an acre lot. So I feel like he has proposed something better than what the existing patterns of development is, as far as preserving some of those large animal rights and the uses that we would anticipate on the larger lots.
Question, a couple comments. I don't want to say it, but it empties onto Gina Road. I don't want to bring that up. But one of the concerns could be with the issues we have with that road. It's good that it will come onto that road rather than onto the main collector. We've talked about that before, and we actually do have restrictions for flag lots if we look at the rest of the lots along 7300 West. My concern is keeping the integrity of surrounding lots. Not necessarily patterns of development, et cetera, but if I had bought an acre lot next to it and everybody started to subdivide that affects the property that I bought. So I support the direction that we've discussed of pursuing, looking at codifying some of those things and preserving some of these areas, to me, to protect that integrity of the other property owners. But in this case, we've already taken care of part of that by putting some provisions, ordinances in places that will prevent flag lots on those others along there. This one would be allowed to do this because it actually can be divided the other way onto that road. The question would be impact fees. If they build a home there, they'd pay the same impact fees everyone else would that could go towards helping fund that road, yes?
Yeah, that would be collected as part of the building permit, yeah.
I don't have any more comments.
Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, I would accept a motion at this time.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number, am I on the right one? 2018-22, approving a zoning map amendment from A1 to A.5 for certain property located at approximately 13705 South 7300 West.
I will second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Take a roll. Any other discussion? No. I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Orn?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So that motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to item 6.2. I wanted to just take a moment on this issue as we approach it and say, first of all, thank you for coming tonight to share your feedback with us. I think the one thing that we all have in common is a common goal to keep Herriman safe. So as we look at this issue and all sides of it, if we could remain civil, because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, which is a safe Herriman. With that said, a couple of other things, and then we're going to open it up to a presentation. We have been longtime supporters of UPD from the beginning and appreciate the services they've provided to our community. We love our officers, and this item on our agenda in no way reflects any dissatisfaction whatsoever with the service we've received with our officers. For us, it simply comes down to a matter of public safety and fiscal responsibility, and we'll go through that in a little more detail. We did want to start out with a presentation at this point, feeling it would be beneficial to have everybody have all of the facts in front of them. And then at that point, we will get to public comment after the presentation. So I would invite, who is giving our presentation? Alan?
I invite Alan to come up and talk about some of the main talking points and numbers, and then Jared's going to fill in some information on some of the history.
Okay, so
I'll add in what I need to.
all right, so we'll start with our finance director, Alan, to go over the presentation.
Okay, going back a few years, I've been with the city of Herriman for almost 4 years now. And from the beginning, I've had questions about how the finances work between UPD, Slavisa, and the city. And it's been a challenge to get to the point of getting some understanding of how this is working. Going back 4 years, we've had numerous meetings trying to get an understanding of the finances, and I've gotten very little response or detail in order to get to where we're at. So my task was to look and see, are we getting what we're paying for? And so I've gone through a number of things and looked at, are we getting what we're paying for? What would it cost us to do what we're doing by ourselves? I am very concerned about the transparency of UPD. It took some pretty hard pushing to even get to the point we're at of understanding it at this point, because it's just not available to us. But the point is, what can we do to make Herriman safer, put more officers on the road so that they are doing what they need to do in the city? And again, as Nicole said, what I'm looking at has nothing to do with how our police officers that we actually have do their job. But I've looked at the finances of how we pay for it and what's happening. One of the this is the cost exhibit, a copy of the cost, or the numbers from the cost exhibit for the current budget year. This shows that we should have 18.5 officers. This began at 2.47 for sergeants, but we've added one by our request, so at 3.63, 0.84 of a lieutenant, 0.84 of a chief, and 0.84 of a civilian. And those 0.84s are because 16% of the costs of our officers and precinct are charged to the Southwest District or the unincorporated county, including Copperton and High Country. So this is what we were billed for and told that we would receive these services. When in fact, we had 13.5 officers, 3.63 sergeants, 0.84 of lieutenants, 0.84 of chiefs, and 0.84 of civilian. This means that we actually had officers here assigned to the place that would have cost us $490,000 less than what we paid for. We've been told that this is made up through constant manning. And constant manning is a program they have to bring people on overtime into our city to take up the shifts that we don't have officers to cover. We've heard, and this is again something that we can't get firm numbers on, is how much of the constant manning we get. We've been told all along that the entire amount is used, then 70%, then 50%, then 30%. At 30%, we are still overpaying by almost $400,000 just for the officers that we are paying for every month that are not assigned to our location. And this is just in the operations. With each of these officers, we also pay equipment. We buy vehicles, we buy radios, we buy computers. We pay for these each year. And let me just state, what's done is that we get an allocation. We get an allocation that says you get one officer for each allocation. we pay for the allocations, whether we get those allocations filled or not. Okay, so just so you're aware, we paid for 5 officers this last year that we didn't get. Now, a piece of their salary was made up for by constant manning. But that's one item. Just one other is when we moved the precinct into our building here and we no longer had rent. The initial response we got from UPD is, we're not going to give you a reduction for your rent that you no longer have, but we'll give you constant manning, which we opposed and were able to get a reduction for the rent. We got the same answer when we told them we're paying for our officers' cell phones. UPD's not. They want to reimburse us with constant manning, which we don't ever get. Also, and this is a concern of mine, is the interrelationship of the sheriff's office with UPD. And an example of that is March, we got a $20,000 increase in our pooled services because it was determined at that point that something that had been charged at the sheriff's office for some time now should be charged to UPD and divided amongst the members. Those kind of things happen routinely. But you'll see, just with the 3 months of that extra amount, we've got another 80,000 or 4 months, there's 80,000 additional pooled services because of this change in accounting cost us $20,000 a month. Now this is the budget that's set forth for the coming year. Now one of the things you'll see here is that they've added 2.5 officers to us, 2.5 allocations. That means that now, in addition to the 5 officers we're paying for that we don't have, we will now be paying for 7.5. And so the amount just goes up and up. Now, just point out a few things. The pooled services, about half of the pooled services relates to the civilian staff that does records and forensics and so forth. The pooled services also includes the sheriff and the undersheriff's portion of their salaries. It is investigations, K-9, drug, and SWAT. Okay? So that's what we're paying for in there. We also pay for, just the normal expenses, operating expenses of the precinct, administrative costs, HR, legal, finance, and IT. The $80,000 of liability insurance. The county is self-insured, so this is an estimate of what our portion of the losses would be. This is a calculation of a model that we've looked at what the city could create their own law enforcement agency. And there's a couple things to note. First of all, most of our pooled services would be gone, but we still have the civilian employees. We still have a dispatch cost. But if you look at the dispatch cost of $60,000, our cost coming from UPD is 256, if I remember. It's 250 something that we pay for dispatch, but the quote from dispatch for ours is $60,000. Our operating costs will be similar to theirs. We would pay more for resource officers because under this model, we wouldn't be pooling our resource officers. We would actually have 4 dedicated officers on our force. So we've gone through and we've looked at this, but I think this graphic will show kind of what the difference is. You saw the dollars. We're actually about $400,000 less a year doing our own. But as you look at the way the officers would be structured, we would actually have 31 sworn officers dedicated to our precinct if we were to do the model we're talking about, where UPD only dedicates 26.31 to our precinct. We also get 4.59 as share of pooled officers that are associated with our precinct. We would also employ directly 5 civilian staff, which they would be here and available for other things. We do have one office manager that would be in either scenario under UPD or under ours. But we also pay for 7.22 employees, civilian employees from the pooled services. So, you know, we could have more dedicated officers in the city for less money. The one thing that would have to happen is that some of these officers in some of these locations would have to fill into the roles of K-9, SWAT, drug, and so forth. But as you look at it and you go through it, financially, we're not getting what we pay for with UPD. We have been years trying to get to the point that we're at right now of the information that we have. You know, the constant manning seems to be a constant answer for what we're trying to, where we're trying to get answers about what's going on with our police force. And we're not getting that. This has gone on for years. We have met many, many, many times with the previous sheriff and now once with the new sheriff to talk about these issues. And they continue. They continue from one to the next. And so we've been looking at, are we getting what we're paying for? And can we get what we're getting or more for the same kind of money? And I believe we can.
Alan, can you just talk a little bit?
Let me just make one point. The mayor is on the line with us right now. If I can make that, yes, okay. So mayor has joined us. Welcome, Mayor. And then our Facebook Live went down for a couple of minutes. I believe it's back up. We are currently streaming, so go ahead. Sorry. Okay, yes, and so this is available and has been available on the website the entire time. Now, I apologize. Go ahead.
No problem, thank you. Alan, I just want you to talk a little bit about, you've referenced the HCC a couple of times, and that, you know, that was one of what we felt was going to be one of the important steps for us that we've already taken up to this point. Can you just talk about the HCC, what that is, and why we took the steps that we did previously to create the HCC?
Okay. A couple of years ago, we started talking about, you know, SLVISA, the Salt Lake Valley Law Enforcement Service Area, which we were members of.
Which is the funding mechanism.
There was a funding mechanism to fund UPD. And what happened with SLVISA was that the SLVISA board would set a tax rate for all of their members. And whatever tax was collected from your area, you were supposed to get that amount of officers. Well, under SLVISA, we never got the officers that we should have been getting for the level of tax that we were getting. We believed that the problem was with SLVISA, that we weren't getting the officers. So we withdrew from SLVISA. We set up our own taxing district, which is the Herriman City Safety Enforcement Area, HCC.
Which, if I could, Alan, I'll just interject for those who are watching or haven't been following our conversation the last several months or years, is the reason that we set up a dedicated taxing district was to preserve those funds for law enforcement, so that could not be commingled with the city's general budget.
Right. It's actually set up as a separate organization, The city council serves as the board of HCC. But our intention at that time was to contract with UPD because we were told if you contract with UPD, you can tell us how many officers you want, and we'll provide you that many officers, and you can pay for whatever level of service you want to have. So that's what we did. And we've set up this district, and the idea was to have more control over how the money was spent. But as we got into this, the problems of Sylvisa continue with UPD, that we have the same issues of getting the people. Now, we may not be able to get all of the people we want to get to staff this, just like UPD can't. But the thing that we will have under our own precinct is if we don't have them, we don't pay for them. Right now, we don't have them and we pay for them. But if we have them in our own precinct, our own force, then we don't pay for them if we don't have them. And you as a council would then be able to determine how and where you would spend your additional dollars to make sure that you've got the law enforcement that you want in the city. So.
I think it's also fair to note there, just along with the taxing entity, and going back to the tentative budget that is now out for everyone to look at, and in there is a great breakdown of just how much of our tax dollars collected is going towards law enforcement, but specifically because that's where it's been collected specifically for, and we chose to protect that through the creation of the HCC to protect those funding. And correct me if I'm wrong, Alan, it's 13.5%-ish of the total property taxes collected right now of our residents go towards that. Is that correct?
That's close as I can remember. It is.
I looked at it.
13.71.
Thank you.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you. And I think another part of this whole equation, and you can maybe speak to this even a little bit more, is the fact that we are a growing community, which means that we have probably more new growth in Herriman annually than we see in most other areas of the county. So new growth translates to more dollars collected because of that. And again, the HCC was created again to help make sure that those new growth dollars collected stayed in Herriman, because that was a question before. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate. It was put in place so that we could make sure that everything collected here stayed here. When I look at the way UPD is run, and this is from what limited information I can get, because it is limited, we get a budgeted amount that says, this is your budget for the coming year. This is how many officers you'll have. This is what your operating expenses will be. This is what your pooled services will be. You get the whole list.
Sorry, Alan, if I could, just to clarify, I find that city finances or government finances are a little backwards from public entity. When you say budget, that's our billed amount. That's what they're telling us.
That's what they're billing us.
We have to pay into the budget. That's not money they're giving us to spend.
They are billing us a budgeted amount. Said, based on our formulas, this is what you should have. They distribute pooled services based on our population, case volume, and property values. And so they distributed a budget to us, a very simplified budget that says this is what you're going to pay this year. I think the thing that everyone's frustrated with is we never get anything at the end that says this is what you really got from us in the way of services. We don't get that. We don't have information that will tell us what we really got for the service.
Just despite asking for it for a long period of time.
We've been asking for it for a long period of time. But I think, you know, as you look at it, we get this budget and we pay based on the budget. But there's no constraints within UPD to make sure that what we pay is used in Herriman. It doesn't appear there's any constraints in that at all. And so even though UPD as a whole is functioning very well, we can't say that we're getting that in Herriman. We end up, we are growing, as you say, and population's growing, which changes the percentage, but we're quite a bit lower than anyone else in case volume. So we don't need the police, I guess, here, but that's not what our residents are telling us. They're telling us.
Alan, can you hear me?
Yes.
So this is Mayor. I just want to start by saying thank you for taking the time to go through this and for letting me participate electronically. One of the concerns that I have, and one of the questions, I don't know if you had a chance to address it yet or not, is how through UPD the officers are allocated to our precinct. Obviously, we've been short. With this potential change, what do we see happening with that, with the allocations that we are able to receive for officers in our community? Specifically going to ultimately the total number of officers that we can have in our precinct that are actually hired.
I can't answer how UPD assigns officers to our precinct. Under a Herriman precinct, having their own force, they would choose that however they want. They could choose the level of service that they choose to do. But as far as who gets what officers, the UPD assigns.
So maybe let me state that slightly differently then. And I think that's what you're getting at is, under UPD, there is a formula that is used to assign those officers, and historically that has led to the fact that we are substantially lower. And I don't know if we hit this already, and I apologize if we already have, but my understanding is what you're saying is that by moving to our own department, we would have full control over making sure we get all the officers that we feel necessary because we are financially responsible for it directly through that entity. Is that correct?
Well, I think the answer to that is that just like UPD, we would try to get all the officers that we want to get. But the thing that would be different is that we would only be paying for the ones who are working. And we would be able to monitor.
So if we're in a situation where, let's say, because we all know that officers are difficult to come by right now because there's just a shortage of the wonderful individuals that are willing to do that, we have now the ability to, if we can't get the officers we need, we can adjust maybe our pay or the benefits or something in order to incentivize more individuals to come work in our community. Is that correct?
Yeah, any incentive that the council chose to offer, we would be able to offer. The overtime.
And we currently don't have that ability?
Mayor?
No.
Could I just make, it's challenging to manage the meeting. Can you just give us a text if you want to speak so that we can manage the meeting a little bit? That would be helpful.
I'd be happy to.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
And in case he wasn't aware when he came on the line, we still have public comment to come.
So Mayor, how we are ordering this is a presentation. Then we're going to invite any and all who want to speak, public comment, and then, but just by way of managing the comments, if you just give us a quick text, we'll patch you in as necessary.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay. Now, I didn't mean to interrupt you. If you want to finish your comment, go right ahead.
No, I think that was the extent. I just want to confirm to me and the public that is the case, that we would have the ability to incentivize officers into our area for our community, even though, because we now have that control.
Okay, thank you. I have a quick clarification point, Alan, if I might. So taking out the manning portion for just a minute, I want to get to it. I want to understand, of the 5 officers that we've been down, this is my first question, what is the total cost that we have been paying without receiving the officers?
So the 5 officers would cost us about $490,000 a year before paying for their equipment and so forth. But our first year of each officer pays additionally for a truck, a radio, a computer, some operating costs, some administrative costs. Just looking at salaries and benefits, it would be somewhere around $490,000 a year.
So 490,000 for the 5 allocations, the 5 officers that we have not been receiving, and we've been paying that 490,000 for?
Well, we had I think three of those allocations in 2016 and 2 more in 2017, and now we're scheduled for 2.5 in 2019.
So were we to continue, and worst case scenario, I'm not saying this is, but worst case, were we not to get those officers at the end of the budget cycle, how much would we have overpaid for not having officers, just by your rough estimate? Without taking the manning, and I'll bring that in a second, but.
Well, yeah, without the constant manning, which we have no information on constant manning, none. We have estimates of percentages, that's all. Okay. But using just the facts of the employees, it would probably be about $1.4 million or $1.5 million, I would guess.
Okay, now that's without the manning, and then I heard you say, so $1.4 million for the officers that we have paid for but have not been on the streets. Now the manning component. I heard you say 30%, 40%, 50%.
Well, we were originally told constantly that it was 70%. We've been told just yesterday it's 30%. So,
So of that 1.4 that we've paid, we can deduct?
Maybe 450. Okay.
Which leaves how much? Let's use the 30% that we were just given by the UPD.
950,000.
So we are, to your estimate, would have been overpaying 950,000 for officers we haven't received.
But as I mentioned, they take the money as a whole and they use it for the entire operation and not necessarily for our operation.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Let me just see if we have council members any other comments before we go to public opinion or public comment.
I just want to make sure I'm clear. So about $1 million of what you talked, but that's just for officers. That's not including the trucks, the guns, everything else, which is pretty substantial.
It is.
That goes with those officers, right?
Will you just talk about the equipment aspect of that?
Do you have an estimate?
Yeah, I know we talked a little bit about that. Have done previously. We did a little bit in the work meeting. We just talked a little bit about the equipment component of that and how we are billed for that.
Well, the 5 officers, we would have been billed about 170 or 75,000 for equipment on them. The ones that we don't have.
Total or a year? Or what's your breakdown there?
Well, that's what we would pay their initial year.
First year.
Then there's about $5,000 a year for vehicle replacement after that. So, some of them are 3 years we haven't filled them, some are 2, so it'll be different.
Have we ever been fully staffed since we joined in 2010?
Like I say, I've only been here 4 years, and
I'm asking the question rhetorically because I've asked the question many times.
Yeah.
The answer I've gotten is no. We've never been
fully staffed.
No, as far as I know, in my experience, we've never been staffed.
According to what we're paying.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, just back to the equipment for a minute. I want to make sure that at least I'm understanding it right and that the information is out there. So we pay the full cost the first year of a new allocation. Let's just take the truck, for example. The full cost, and then we're charged a portion of replacement every year after until that vehicle is replaced.
It is. Yep.
And that's based on, Brett, from what you reported on the fleet board there. There's a point scale that's used to determine when they're replaced. So that's anywhere from maybe 4, 5, 6 years, depending on.
It's actually about 3 to 4 years.
3 to 4 years, okay.
Patrol vehicle gets replaced. That's pretty much the average. Depending on what it's used for, it could go longer. But that's typically 3 to 4 years or a line officer's truck's replaced.
Okay, so in a again, this is a very simplistic view of that one issue. Mm-hmm. In a 3-year time frame, we would have almost paid for 2 full vehicles without having that vehicle or a person in it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Or close to?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm understanding that issue.
Okay. Let's go ahead and go to public comment. Thank you very much for that overview. We will take some time now for public comment, and I've already mentioned, I know this is an emotional issue. We appreciate you coming out. If we could just maintain civility, we can have a good, healthy discussion tonight. What? Yeah. So just by way of process here, if you would just come up and, for the record, state your name and address, and we give everybody 2 minutes. That's what we always do. But I would first like to start with the 2 comment forms that I have, patiently waiting. Thank you so much. Let's start with Sheriff Rivera.
Is there a time limit, just so I know?
Well, typically we would go 2 minutes.
Okay, so I'll just try and hurry then.
Yeah, and Sheriff will give you a little bit of latitude. So,
okay. So I'm Sheriff Rosie Rivera, and as you all know, I'm fairly new as the sheriff. I did inherit some problems that we have been trying to work on and fix. I just wanted to let you know that right off the top. We have been working diligently to work on some issues that have come from our UPD board regarding our costing model. Some of the board, they're not happy with the way the costing model works, but I do want to tell you the costing model was created by other board members, and Mayor Crane was one of the ones that helped create this model. We understand that if the model doesn't work now, we've had so much turnover on our board, they're all new board members, that we have to adjust and try to make it a model that works for everyone. We can do this, however, it takes time. And like I said, I've had a short amount of time to make some significant changes. I do want to talk a little bit about some of the things that, Alan, you brought up. With this, we were notified on Friday, and we were not notified by Herriman. We were notified because somebody saw it on the agenda. And so we have not had a whole lot of time to take a look at this. As Alan said, he's only talked to me once regarding this. So the communication piece really needs to change. I have not talked to Brett Wood about it, but I have talked to the city or the precinct chief. And unfortunately, he's not here tonight. He's out of town. But the way the UPD model works is the cities want local control. So we give you a precinct chief. It's similar to a police chief. They manage the budget, they manage the operations, and I meet with them every week. We have a management meeting. I have an open door policy. They can come and talk to me at any time on any issues that they see. We know that Herriman had some issues regarding the Slavisa, and that came out in the UPD board meetings. And this has been going on for a few years. But like I said, we just found out Friday. Prior to that, about May 3rd, I received a call from Mayor Dowley from Holiday, and he said Herriman is talking about some issues they have. You might want to call and schedule a meeting. So I did that. I asked my precinct chief if we could get a meeting, and that's the one time I've talked with Alan. And also Councilman Henderson, who sits on our UPD board. We discussed a lot of different issues. We walked away from that meeting feeling like we could work all of this out, and then, like I said, Friday we saw the agenda and what was on the agenda. With that, we met with our finance committee yesterday, and Councilman Henderson advised us that this is going to happen, and they're ready to go July 1. So with that, we put together a committee, and we have been working since yesterday on a committee, and we are ready to help you with your transition. We do believe that we need to keep a good partnership. Public safety is our concern. How we get there and how you pay for public safety, that can all be worked out, but the residents of Herriman are so important to us. We have many of our officers here today that live in Herriman. We feel like we are part of Herriman, We do know that Herriman residents have suffered a lot of tragedy this year, and we do not want to bring any more grief to the citizens of Herriman. So with that, we are willing to work with you with your transition. We are ready to go with it. It's taken us hours and hours of doing this, but we will be able to make that transition July 1st. And, you know, you notified us yesterday you just needed to change your branding. So we can make that work. We're going to meet with our officers after this, and we will talk to them about it, but we want to keep the relationship. That's the most important piece, and that's what I'm here for. I know the mayor and our chair of our UPD board also has some things that he wants to say, but I do want to say that Brett Wood was my son's coach. We have a relationship, and we'll always be able to talk in a manner that we can work things out. Whatever you choose tonight is, I hope for the best for your residents, but I don't want you to think that we don't care, because we do. We've been right along with your residents with those tragedies. Many of our officers have experienced the tragedy right along with them. So it's important that we keep that relationship with all of you. So thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. If I could invite Mayor Silvestrini. Oh, do you have another comment, Sheriff? Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you, Council. I'm Jeff Silvestrini. I'm the mayor of Mill Creek, and I'm the current chair of the Unified Police Department Board. I took that position in January, and I've been honored to serve with Councilman Henderson on that. And before that, I served with Mayor Freeman, and I do want to say, since this is the first time I've addressed the Herriman Council, on behalf of the city of Mill Creek, I really appreciate all the help that Herriman provided to me and to our city in the form of mentoring and otherwise, and that goes to this council. It also goes to former Mayor Freeman, former Councilwoman Moser Westman, and Brent Wood. They've all been great to help, and we have a great relationship with Herriman, and I certainly want to continue that relationship. So, speaking on behalf of the Unified Police Department Board and the 11 other member jurisdictions besides Herriman that comprise that great agency, we will respect your decision to lead the Unified Police Department, and we will do what we can to assist in that, should you decide to do that. That said, we wish you would stay, and we believe you're making a monumental mistake. I've listened to the work session that you had last Wednesday. I listened to the work session you had tonight. I heard the presentation tonight. And while we share some common ideas about some things that could be improved about budgeting and about the way pooled services are viewed in the UPD, it's still a great model. It still saves all of our residents a lot of money by participating in that pool. And there are a number of misconceptions that I believe your council has with respect to the ideas about constant manning and what you actually get and what you pay for. I know that my chief in Mill Creek uses constant manning. We're bigger than you, and we pay more than you, and we're using constant manning to fill those open positions. We have 8 open positions, not because we don't want to fill them, but because there's a shortage of police officers in our state, and Salt Lake City is trying to hire 50 new ones, and the UPD just can't fill those positions because it's tough to hire cops. So we're getting what we're paying for in Mill Creek because our chief is using constant manning to fill those positions. And I think if Herriman's only filling them at the rate of 30%, frankly, that you should talk to your chief about that. Because my chief is filling them, okay? So we'd love to sit down and talk about some of these issues. We can't do it in public comment in 2 minutes. But I will say, you guys represent Herriman, and you are accountable to your residents, and you'll make the best decision for Herriman regarding police services, and we'll support you in that. But the other thing that I would like to say, I found out about the specific issues that Herriman had about accounting at a meeting that we had here in your conference room on April 30th, which is just a little bit more than 2 weeks ago. And none of us on the UPD board had any idea that you were thinking about leaving UPD until I was notified on Friday that a notice went out on the public notice website announcing this meeting. I don't know what else you've done about public engagement or anything else, but that's the first time that UPD board members found out about that. And I talked with Councilman Henderson and with Brett Wood on Saturday, and then I learned that you were planning to leave, and that was pretty much a done deal in terms of council solidarity on the issue here. But I don't think I really learned, maybe I'm mistaken, but I was kind of shocked to hear on Tuesday at our Finance Committee meeting that you intended to leave so soon, by July 1. And I guess all I can say about that is I view that as an abrupt decision. And I would like to appeal to you in the spirit of good feeling that, you know, there is a right way to do things and there is a wrong way to do things. You know, your decision tonight affects 11 other jurisdictions in the Unified Police Department. And as you've been told, we're in the middle of the budget cycle. The UPD has to prepare a budget, just like your city does, just like my city does, just like all the other 11 jurisdictions in the UPD have to do. And you're having a meeting on an odd evening just to accommodate that budget cycle. So you're doing the same thing we're doing. Your decision to leave UPD essentially is like throwing a hand grenade into the room with respect to the UPD budget and our attempt to rebalance what we would have to do in that regard to refigure pooled services. And to the extent that that's going to affect our city budgets, you're throwing more hand grenades into your sister jurisdictions' council rooms, and that's not the right way that you should do this, okay? If you want to leave, great. You know, the interlocal agreement really contemplates a year's notice. And I know there's a non-funding provision which you're probably relying upon to think you can get out if you don't budget money for UPD by July 1. But that's, you know, in the spirit of this agreement, that was never intended to be used in a situation like this. So what I will appeal to you about is this. If you want to leave UPD, you know, go with the Lord on that. You know, that's your decision. But please do this in a logical way and delay your departure till at least the end of this year so that we can plan a logical transition. You know, there's so many unanswered questions. What happens to the fund balance? What happens to the vehicles? You know, what happens to the officers? Are you really going to stand up a police department in 6 weeks? What happens to all the other missing things that you get from UPD that you won't have right away? This is not something, public safety is too important to make this kind of a decision so precipitously, so abruptly. Give us some time, we'll work with you to do what you want to do, but please don't decide to leave by July 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. If we could refrain from clapping or booing, the other side of it. If, I know you're pleased with his comment, and that's fine. Just by way of protocol, if we could just not, you can do this if you have support, but it just, no clapping or booing if you don't mind. So with that, I would love to turn some time over to the rest of the public for those that might have comments. So again, if you'll come forward, state your name and address, you'll see a 2-minute time clock, and then the time is yours. Please come up.
Hello, my name is Randy Ricks. I just learned about this on Facebook last
Address,
night.
please, Randy.
Oh, my name is Randy Ricks. I live at 14174 South Desert Oak Drive.
Thank you.
I just learned about this last night on Facebook, and this is the first city council meeting I've ever been to, so it's kind of an adjustment for me. I'd like to echo what the mayor said. I think what the mayor said makes a lot of sense. I don't know of a single business out there right now that's not struggling to hire people. And for us to think that we're going to hire a police force from nothing, I don't know how we could do that. And we're looking for 20 officers and sergeants and lieutenants and all that. I don't see how we can man a police force in that amount of time. I also wonder what's going to be our backup. We've had some pretty serious situations here in the last little while. We've had a shooting that we had tremendous support from UPD. We had another SWAT situation out here that we had tremendous support from UPD. What's our backup if this happens? Where do we go? You mentioned that we're not paying for people if we're not using them, but what happens when we need them? So that's the biggest thing is what happens when we need help and who's going to back us up. So that's really all I have to say. I just think it's a bad idea. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy.
Good evening. My name's Dustin Dern. I live at 14311 Sheeprock Drive. Thank you, council members, mayor, city manager Wood, for letting me have the time to speak. I've lived in Herriman for a long time, probably longer than most of the people in this room. I grew up here, so have a little experience with Herriman. I'm here this evening to express my concerns with this item on the agenda, 6.2. I'm in support of public safety, specifically regional service models and large capable organizations. Just for some of my reasons for support, they reduce duplication of efforts, which in the end decreases wasteful tax dollar spending. They provide for highly qualified, capable specialty teams, units, individuals within a single organization and allow for enhanced capabilities system-wide. They provide for continuity of operations and continuity of communications during some of these tragic times that we've recently experienced in our community. They erase borders of cities, towns, counties, and provide best practices and standards of cover for the community members as a whole. And lastly, the simple advantages of an economy of scale. I feel that I'm well educated on the issue at hand, and I don't see this as a service district issue, but rather a breakdown and mismanagement with organizational policy and at the administrative levels within UPD and with financial transparency. I believe these issues can be resolved through action at the UPD board level. I'm asking our council to do their due diligence, and specifically I'm asking our UPD board representative to continue working at that level with his counterparts, providing guidance, policy, and a transparent budget that falls within best practices. I feel that UPD has provided good service for our community. I hope we continue with UPD service now and in the future. Once again, I thank you for your service and for the opportunity to voice my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Boutte, and I live at 5864 Autumn Dust Cove in Herriman, and I've lived here for 17 years, and this is my second meeting that I've been to. I also found out about this on Facebook. Seems to have been a really hot topic related to just the change from UPD over to a Herriman-based organization. I also wanted to thank UPD for the response that they gave my family, and I think that they've done a really excellent job. I also understand the concerns that you have from a financial perspective. I would agree with the mayor here that I think we need to do a little bit more research related to see if it is feasible to change to a Herriman-based situation and understand that the impact that it has to our other cities. Just one other comment on this entire situation. I think that we haven't seen a buildup of what it would cost to implement. I see a year-over-year cost related to what those costs and the savings could or may be, but I do not see what it would actually cost to actually put a capital infrastructure in place to replace autos, just all of the related infrastructure that would come up with the police department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, council members. My name is Jeremy Anderson. This is my first council meeting here. I live at 14573 Highfield Drive. I've been a Herriman resident for about 5 years. I believe really strongly in UPD and specifically in their ability to be able to allocate resources to where there is need. Quite frankly, with where I live in Herriman, I'm right on the edge of the city. If I look out my front window, great. If something happens and someone needs help, I can worry about Herriman's police coming and helping. If I look out my back window, suddenly I'm thinking, do I care? Do I care about my neighbors behind me? Oh, they're in Riverton. They're fine. They can deal with it. They can do whatever they want. I genuinely believe that we need to stick together as a region and that we gain value from having safety regionally rather than just resorting to simple city limits. And I'm really disturbed by how quickly we've decided to go after this kind of an issue. The fact that there's chatter like this is already a done decision as a resident of the city is really disturbing to me. And it's disturbing to the point that I might consider trying to challenge somebody in a re-election. I guess that's all I've got to say. On a personal, emotional level, whatever it is that the council ends up deciding, I was involved in an accident in unincorporated Salt Lake County a while ago that almost took my life. I owe my life to the Unified Police Department and the Unified Fire Department, and I want to say thank you.
Thank you so much. Well,
noted on the record.
Yes, if we could just make note that Mayor Watts has miraculously joined us. Welcome, Mayor. Nice to have you. Please.
Hi, I'm Mark Argyle. I live at 5518 West Prairie Dawn Circle. I've looked at this meeting tonight, and I can see both sides of the issue. I know there's a lot of divide on this issue, but I can see the financial aspect of it, and I can also see the budget of scale staying with Unified Police. Because let's suppose we don't have those 5 officers in our city, but they're available elsewhere, that they can pull those in if we need them. If anybody, I haven't heard in the budget aspect that being short those 5 officers, it has cost us and it has affected the security of the city. That is what we need to be concerned about. Not just the financial aspect, but the security. Having another entity like, keeping Herriman, personal, and having that police force here in Herriman might bring the community together a little more. However, having extra amount in administrative costs, equipment costs, building costs, and specialty costs that we are getting with Unified, we've got to balance both ends of that subject. That's all I've got to say about that.
Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Julie McCutcheon. I live at 13014 Peacemaker Way. I did like seeing the breakout of all the workforce and the budget given for that. I think the major thing that we're missing here is a breakout for the equipment, the start of a new police force for Herriman. Some of what was being said didn't quite make sense to me, as far as it didn't quite add up on the equipment side. I'm glad to hear that Unified Police Department is wanting to clean up, change their budget and possibly allocate things a little differently. So I hope that we can continue to work with Unified Police. With the current problems that we're having in the city, as far as the high schoolers, this is something that may be related seasonally. So I don't think now is the right time to separate from United Police Department, where we do have a really good force in place, and our community knows these officers, and they've been very helpful. And now is important that we have them with us, I believe. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Tyler Pugh. Address is 14474 South Cobblefield Circle.
I want to agree with everybody that's gone before, and I will add that I think separating the budget from the shared services we're getting and not making that combined decision is extremely a bad way to go about it. You have to consider all of it together, not just the budget. I also wanted to have my own experience with UDP brought up. I called them on the non-emergency number. They're at my house within 5 minutes. They were there for 2 to 3 hours taking care of an incident and had 4 other officers there with just in a few minutes after that, and I was very impressed with them. And I just think that also it seems very strange that the public hasn't been notified in a fashion that everybody can come to these meetings and be able to know specifically about this issue, because this is an issue for everyone. And I think that's very odd, and I'd love to hear comments from you guys on that if you can at some point. So appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Heather Ritchie. My address is 6341 West Rodeo Way. And I just wanted to say that I really do like the UPD's efforts in keeping Herriman safe so far. We lost a little girl about 9 years ago, and they were there, fire department and UPD was there, and they handled it so well. So I have just a lot of respect for them. I think that also keeping part of a bigger picture always helps us to stay current in different things. So being united with not only Herriman, but keeping UPD sounds sound to me, and seems like it would be a safer thing for Herriman and Herriman citizens. And anyway, that's just my input today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Pro Tem, while they're coming up, would it be possible for me to get a copy of the agenda? I came straight from the airport and I don't have one.
A copy of the agenda for the mayor. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Eric Dietz. I live at 14629 South Buckbrush Circle. And I've been living in Herriman since 2002, so certainly not the oldest resident, but I've been here quite a long time. Seen a lot of changes over the years, some good, some bad. So I have a lot of concerns leaving UPD. First and foremost is losing the resources that we have. We have resources to everything from K-9 to detectives to evidence to property to SWAT teams, and we know the SWAT teams have been out here quite a few times lately. Things certainly aren't getting better in our community. If anything, they're getting a little bit worse. So for us to start our own police department now, I don't understand. If everybody says the services are so good, is this based off, forgive me, a budget report? Because I've been here a long time. I know police department and city council budgets. I guarantee you that budget will double in the next 5 years if you create your own police department. Ask departments that have done it, ask cities that have done it, they'll tell you the same thing. If we have such good service, which we do, let's work with UPD, let's get the problems fixed, let's improve the service that we have, and go from there. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
My name's Leif Nielsen. I live at 4603 Heritage Field Circle. I've lived in Herriman for about 4 or 5 years, and I've been very pleased with what I've seen with UPD. I understand the budget, both sides to it as well. One thing that gets my mind is, we want 31 officers. Are we buying 31 new vehicles? Let's say it's $100,000 a vehicle. That's $3 million just up front. Boom. That's just their trucks and their cars, not SWAT trucks, not any other tactical items that they need. The other thing, too, is with Riverton right by us, UPD is also in that precinct as well. so they can pull officers very quickly to get to where we need to. The other thing is too, I think as a resident, the residents should have a vote, have a voice, so we all know about what's going on regarding leaving UPD. Yeah, I haven't seen any statistics or anything regarding our calls not being answered in a timely fashion. In my aspect, they have been. The resources are there. Every time I've needed them, they're there, 1 or 2 officers. So I think they're doing well in that aspect. I just think it needs to be more thought out, not 6 weeks, have a new police department put together, chief, deputy, sergeants, patrol officers, all the equipment, all the support that they need. And if Salt Lake City's trying to hire 50 officers, it's going to be pretty tough, I believe. And it could cost a lot more than what we're anticipating. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, there we go. Come on up.
My name is Brady Clark. I live 13953 Emmeline Drive. I've been a Herriman resident for about 12 years. This is also my first time to attend, which probably isn't the best. I should probably come in and have more voice into what's going on. I would like a little more transparency from the UPD, and I think that we could work with them to get that. I'm a little bit disappointed that we're kicking the football down the road this far. It sounds like the decision's already been made, but yet we have one meeting with UPD. If we're getting something, we're not getting something that we're paying for, why have we not called them in and said, hey, we are not getting this? Where were those meetings? I don't know that we've been diligent in, I appreciate all the work that you did to put that together, but why are we not calling them in and saying, hey, why are we doing this? Why are we not getting this? I just don't think that we've done our due diligence, and I think that we can do better for our community. And to be honest, I'm happy with UPD. They're great officers. One of the other things that I have a little bit of a concern with is Taylorsville. They left. They've gone to UPD now. They had their own. While I was waiting for this, because I just found out about it, I pull up Cottonwood Heights. They're having issues. They're going to have to cut officers because they don't have the funding because it's got so big and out of control. Who's to say that that's not going to happen to us? And then we're footing the bill, and our taxes continue to increase, and we get blindsided. I would just like us to work better with them. If we've only had one meeting, that's not enough. That's not sufficient. We need to have more meetings and communicate. If we're not communicating with them and they don't know about it and they're finding out from other cities or other people, then that's not right. So we need to correct that, have better communication, and do our due diligence. Thanks.
John, can I ask you, thank you so much for your comment, sorry. Thank you. John, if I could ask a question. Is there a legal requirement for the speakers to list their address?
No, there's not.
Okay, so I don't want to preclude anybody from wanting to speak, and I want to make sure that the officers have an opportunity to speak without fear that they are putting their address out publicly. So if there are any officers that wish to speak during this public comment period, I would invite them to do so without any need to list their address. I'm sorry? No, not at all.
My name's Dwayne Jensen. I don't live in Herriman. I live in Sandy, but I've been working out here since 2012. I'm one of the afternoon shift. I'm the afternoon shift supervisor for the first half of the week, and I've seen this movie before. I've been in law enforcement since I started In April of 1985, I just hit 33 years. And the gentleman that mentioned Taylorsville, he's exactly right. Cities have left and said they could do it better for cheaper, and it hasn't turned out that way. When Taylorsville come back, they had, I think, 10 of their patrol cars that we had to immediately take off the road because they didn't pass inspection to be on the road. Had they not come back, they'd still be using those cars as police cars because they couldn't afford the upkeep. Same thing happened with Midvale. I think there was about 4 or 5 cars from Midvale that we had to immediately take off the road. And it just seems like it's the little things, the little things that you don't think about. And I can't sit here and give you a list of them, but it's just all those little things that you don't think about that seem to come up and bite you in the backside and nibble away at your budgets. Cottonwood Heights, same thing. They're facing over a $2 million budget shortfall, looking to lay off 5 guys. Not saying that could happen to Herriman, but it's a very definite possibility. Herriman is getting busier. It's getting busier all the time. Yes, I have constant manning on my shift that I rely on. I have 3 officers assigned for the afternoon shift, and 2 of them are constant man officers. And there are times when all 3 of those officers are busy and there's still priority calls, and I have to send officers up from Riverton to help cover those calls. Now, granted, sometimes Herriman guys come down into Riverton. But that's the unique thing about this partnership and this relationship is how we're able to, it's kind of a soft border between Riverton and Herriman going back and forth. But you know what, it's not a soft border with other agencies, South Jordan or Bluffdale that are also out in this area. And that border gets a little harder when you're not part of, I guess you'd call it the UPD family.
If you could wrap up your time, please.
Okay, well, I just think it's a big mistake. I've seen this movie before. I know how it ends. And I think you're making a decision based on emotion rather than really sitting down and looking at the facts. And ask you to reconsider. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the council, mayor. My name is Justin Hoyle. I'm a member of the Unified Police Department. I've been there for 21 years. It's an organization that I'm very proud of and very proud to serve the citizens of this county and of this city for that time. I truly believe in this organization. I believe in the model that is set forth. And knowing the relationships we've had, when I started my career, I began my career in FTO working here in Herriman 21 years ago. This is a great city. I think the partnerships we have has been great for many years and would love to see that relationship continue with this between the Unified Police Department and your city. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
My name is Brian Sloan. I'm a resident of Herriman, and I'm a sergeant with the Salt Lake City Police Department. And I just wanted to get up here real quick and say that Unified's facing the same problems that we all are. There are no applicants out there for police work right now. Salt Lake City, they've said on the news that we're going to try to hire 50 new officers. We're not getting 50 new officers. We don't have those kind of applicants coming in. And unless you're willing to pay crazy amounts of money, even if you try to start your own police department, you're going to run into the same problems because you're going to be trying to hire already experienced officers, and you're going to have to pay them at the top of the pay scale. And even as well as Salt Lake City's paying and Unified, we're just hurting. So I just wanted to say that and let you know some of the things you're up against. Thank you.
Thank you.
Should probably get up and speak my piece real quick. I'm Jason Mazarin. I've been chosen to be the new Unified Police Chief, Deputy Chief for the department. And I consider that a great honor. I'm excited to do it. And I'm looking forward to the time when I get the opportunity to move forward with this great organization of people that sit behind me. Amazing, amazing men and women. I know the city has some concerns, and I appreciate that. And one of my #1 objectives as we move forward here in a very few short weeks, and we continue to retain the good things that we have, but we are also going to rebuild some things cast aside some things and create some new things. And I think it's healthy for organizations to every few years go through that process, and that's what we are going to do. And I can certainly commit to you, and more importantly, I'm committing to the folks behind me that we're going to be doing some great things in the future. And if there are issues like what's been described, that's going to get fixed real fast, and that's going to change. So again, I certainly echo the sentiments of the sheriff and very much what our UPD board chair, Mayor Silvestrini, had to say. We will, if you want to move forward, we very much respect that, and we'll do whatever we can to assist you with that transition. But we will learn lessons from this issue, and we'll go forward and make the Unified Police Department better and stronger than it's ever been before. So either way, we're here and we're ready to help. Thanks.
Thank you. Any more comments? Thank you so much for all of your feedback. We've taken diligent notes as we've listened. I would like to turn over some time to the council to speak to some of those. I want to start off, if I could.
Are we going to close the public comment?
Oh, thank you. Yes. See, this is when you have a real mayor around. We'll go ahead and close the public comment, and then we'll go into comments. So with that, I just want to make a couple of comments, and then I would turn it over to, then I'll turn it over to my fellow council members. I want to first start out and say, we don't come here tonight cavalierly. We have worked on this issue for years, as we've said. We've been longtime supporters of the Unified Police Department, of the model that you've all discussed. We were right on board right from the beginning. We've been pleased with our officers. So it is not without a lot of due diligence, a lot of hours, a lot of meetings that we sit here today. And I want to make that clear. The public may not be aware of all of the efforts that have gone in, but it is monumental, the amount of time that has gone in. And UPD, I'm sure, would echo to some degree the amount of effort that we have put in as a city council to try and understand the financials, which of course is our responsibility as a city council. In no way could we come to the public and say we are putting out $1 million for anything and getting nothing in return. We couldn't say that about parks. We couldn't say that about anything. And so you will understand why this becomes an important financial issue to us. Agreed completely that this is not solely a financial issue. That being said, $1 million is nothing to trifle with, when in fact we have fiscal responsibility for your taxpayer dollars, and we take that very seriously. I would say that public safety and fiscal responsibility are probably two of the top concerns that we have as city council. So we come here today as advocates for the taxpayers, for our citizens. That's what we're here for today. I think we've had a really civil, healthy discussion, and I am appreciative of that. Partnerships are important, and we've had a really healthy partnership with Unified Police Department. I appreciated the comments that the sheriff and the mayor made, and you as well, that you look forward to continuing that relationship. We certainly have no interest in severing important relationships. We are neighbors, we are family, we have experienced hard times together. That being said, I do think there is responsibility when you have relationships, and one of those is responsiveness and transparency, and that's where we feel like maybe some of the failing has been. So it's been nice to hear that you recognize some of those failings, that you're willing to fix those. That's heartening to me. I don't want to leave any impression with our citizens that we have not tried to work out this relationship. We feel like we have. So that being said, I want to thank you for the service you've given. Whatever we decide tonight, I absolutely agree that we've appreciated the time we've had, and if we have more time in the future, all the better. With that being said, I'm going to turn over some time to my fellow council members, and perhaps we start first with our committee member who's been many, many hours on this.
So I'm our current representative on the UPD board. I think one is asked to kind of go through a history. Several accusations were made that I really kind of take offense to, so I'd be happy to address some of those things. Timeline, as Alan had discussed, we've been asking questions for years. We haven't been getting answers. The answers that we have gotten have not been sufficient. Going back a year ago, I'm sorry to rehash all of this, but to kind of reset everything, I should start by, sounds like there's some confusion, even still, with our UPD partners on the proceedings tonight and the message that we delivered since Friday, since I was given direction to report to the board and give them some heads up on the direction we feel we're going. Tonight's proceedings are simply, what's on the agenda is to vote for a notice of withdrawal. There's no time associated with that, et cetera. I guess what's raising the furor is after our council meeting, after a report, and I'll go through this timeline this last week, we put this on the agenda. As it was worded by our recorder, as soon as we saw the wording of the withdrawal, we immediately started calling our partners on the board, myself in particular, asking for meetings. We had conversations over the weekend, met with partners Monday, Finance Committee meeting yesterday to inform them of the next part that we had indicated. So tonight's proceedings are simply a notice of withdrawal. What I indicated yesterday at the Finance Committee meeting is that as we've come to the conclusion, done our homework over a period of time, the HCC, the taxing district, gave me direction to inform them that we don't feel that there is any way that we can agree to another 12-month budget and overpay by nearly $2 million. And that if necessary, if we couldn't find an amicable agreement, there's an interlocal to consider. We've consulted with our legal counsel. If we can't find an amicable agreement on how to transition, that we are prepared to draw a hard line July 1st. But it seems that that message has been construed as, we're out of here, we don't want anything to do with you guys. And that's not the case. We've indicated that we see several ways forward, several ways to work together over a period of time for that transition, but that we simply cannot just put the Herriman taxpayers on the hook for that tax bill for another year and continue to not receive the services that we've been promised. The second thing is, as far as services, as many council members have mentioned in our work meetings, I think every time we discuss this, we try to make it clear that we're extremely happy with our officers and the job that they do, their competency, their level, the calls that we receive. I would agree with every single person that said the experience with UPD when you interact is fantastic. But there's a difference between the people that we appreciate and the job that they do and the level of service that we receive for what we're paying for. That's what the dispute is. There's a huge difference. It's not that we're happy with the service and complaining about. We're happy with the people. We're happy with our chief. We're happy with the job that he does and the answers that he's given us to our questions, even though it puts him under pressure from his superiors who don't like the answers that he's given us. So I think we need to separate those two things. The people are fantastic. We just don't have enough of them, but we're paying for them. As far as the timeline goes, having meetings, we've had way more meetings than one meeting. I just find that kind of just a little crazy. Just from my involvement on the board beginning January 1st, I've attended every board meeting. I've had discussions with countless board members. Many of them are not here because they tend to feel the same way that we do. They have the same questions. They have the same issues. We've been pushing this for quite some time. Going back to Slovisa, and council members can interject, but going back to Slovisa, that was our frustration, was the same thing, was the actual level of service and watching our tax money go basically to a county coffer and then be told what we're going to get from it. We were told by this organization that, well, you know, the contract cities, there's other cities who just pay a contract fee for their services, and if you want more officers, if you did that, you would be able to get them. So we said, great. We'll separate from that, create our own taxing district so that it's not commingled with other city funds. It's earmarked for law enforcement. We can't mess with that money. That's what we want it for. And now that taxing district has tasked me as the chair of that board, our representative on the UPD board, and the finance director to ascertain whether we're actually receiving the services that we're paying for. And the conclusion we've come to over this year-long process is a resounding no. In fact, the numbers you're shown tonight is a follow-up to several meetings we've already had on this issue, public meetings, work meetings, and general council meetings. So apologize, Alan, we didn't have him go through everything we've done over the last year. This was just a follow-up to give us an ultimate conclusion of here's a stark reality. What we had asked him to do is compare for tonight if we did our own versus where we were at to answer that question once and for all. as far as meetings goes, we've had multiple conversations as far as documentation. One thing that should be noted is, as these guys have found out, I document everything. I keep records of everything. We have the email chains that go back to these meetings. The idea that Sheriff Rivera requested a meeting on May 3rd is just insulting to me. We had requested, our finance director had requested specific financial information going back to, I have an email dated February 12th, which had not been answered by the finance director for over a month. Our city manager and myself as the board reached out to the brass and said, we need answers to this. We found out that it went through the chain, and instead of getting answers to those questions, we got a call from another board member saying, can we, as some of these other cities, come and talk to you? Well, yeah, sure, great. That was after we had reached out to the sheriff's office. I have the email, you can grandma request it. We reached out to the sheriff's office requesting a meeting to discuss grave concerns we have about these issues and the coming budget. The meeting actually occurred on May 3rd. I could go on and on with some of the accusations that were leveled, but it's there for the public record. You can look it up. You can see our history of communication and the history of those meetings. Stemming from that, April 11th, City Council had a meeting, a quarterly update from our UPD chief, where he answered a lot of the questions that we've raised about service level, about constant manning, about everything that we have been asking him aside in a public meeting. And the residents who were there that night were, quite frankly, I would say disgusted at the difference between what we think we're getting and what is actually happening. So then, resulting from that public meeting, council meeting on April 11th, the finance director and myself were then again tasked with, if we cannot get the information we've been asking for from UPD, then we have to make a stark comparison of, all right, if worse comes to worse, this budget is due July 1. We have to make a decision. We have a financial deadline coming. Do we agree to this for another year, or do we have to look at other options? And so the team went to work and really stepped up their game. They've been working on it for a year, but we gave them a deadline. We have to know, as a board who is responsible for the taxpayers' money, and telling them we're getting something, but people are feeling it. Comments were made that they feel that the safety in our community is getting worse. Well, there's a reason for that. At any given time, we only have 1 or 2 officers on patrol. And they're not patrolling, as was mentioned. They're responding to calls and needing help from other areas to respond to those calls. We have no policing. We have nobody watching traffic. We have nobody watching for the bad things that could happen. There's no presence. I've seen it myself. I've had neighbors come and ask me, where are they? We don't have that policing presence. We have calls for service, we have response to incidents, but we don't have the community policing, and our community is feeling the effects of that. We feel that burden of responsibility is on our shoulders to make sure that those things really are being taken care of. So while we absolutely appreciate the response we receive and the competency of the officers we have, we simply we don't have enough of them. When we're not getting the value of what our taxpayers think they're paying for, and that's our job, is to figure that out. That's the accountability that they put on our shoulders. As I talk to friends and neighbors about these things, they tell me, well, that's why you're there. That's why we want you there, is to ask these tough questions and make these decisions, because we don't have the time every time that there's an issue that comes up to march the whole city down to City Hall and vote on an issue. That's why we have representatives. The timeline stemming from that ultimate council meeting on the 11th, kind of ignoring all the other meetings that we'd had before that discussing these issues, including the complications of getting things started and costs of vehicles, et cetera. We're fortunate to have our city manager that's been involved with this since the beginning, who sits on the board for fleet, who understands all of those numbers. We definitely have talked with many other entities. I've also received calls from people who work in other departments who have found some of the comments made offensive, that somehow cities that self-provide aren't taking care of their residents. All of our surrounding neighbors do. Sandy, their own police department, Draper, West Jordan, South Jordan, Murray, just to name a few. And we absolutely have talked to them. We've absolutely talked to all the others that have had issues doing their own. We're definitely not jumping into this blindly, but with the work that we've done over the last few years and the resistance that we've received from the board of 13 members, of which we're one, we get outvoted every single time. As we go into these budget meetings, voice our concerns afterwards, otherwise with other members. To put it bluntly, I feel like we're getting pushed in the corner, and they take our lunch money every day, and they're told, and we're like, see you next time. We're at the point where we're ready to say enough. We're going to take control. We're not going to put up with that kind of treatment anymore. In the meeting yesterday, it's good to hear the conciliatory tone today, but in the meeting yesterday, we heard threats. We're not going to work with you. You're not going to have your officers. This is from one of the top people in the sheriff's office and UPD. Unfortunately, these mischaracterizations and these accusations, this type of attitude, goes into our decision-making process as well. We need to have local control. We need to be able to be nimble and respond to the dynamic community that we have and be treated fairly. Our residents deserve that. Every one of us works hard. We're looking at our budget, as Councilman Smith pointed out. A large portion, if you look at your property tax bill, not much goes to Herriman City. It all goes to the county, public safety, fire, schools. Got Water Conservancy, a couple small ones. 2.2% goes to Herriman City. We're stewards of that tax money. We're tasked with making those decisions and making sure our residents are safe. And as we grow, we have the ability to police the things that could happen. So without going too far back in history, from that point forward, we agreed to meet with, at the request of Mayor Silvestrini and Mayor Daly, after our request for a meeting with the sheriff. So rather than getting a response to our questions, we got a couple of other board members requesting a meeting to figure out what we want. That meeting took place on April 30th, after we had scheduled a meeting with the sheriff. That was Monday, April 30th, for that following Thursday, May 3rd. At that meeting on April 30th, we made it extremely clear that Herriman City, the HCC, the taxing district, is not okay with this coming budget. We're not going to vote in favor of this. We're not going to release funds if we have to. May 3rd, we met with the sheriff, undersheriff, Unified Police Department chief, the finance director, their legal counsel, and our team, city manager, myself, our finance director, our legal counsel, our communications person, etc. And I read the email that we asked specific financial questions, and the answer from the finance director was, I'm not prepared to answer those. And the follow-up we got from the other members in that meeting was a lot of talk around it. Those questions were never answered. That meeting was left the same way. We have a problem. We have to decide on this budget whether to release $5 million, almost an $800,000 increase with no increase in service, which we've determined we're overpaying by nearly $2 million a year. We have to make that decision for the Herriman taxpayers at the June board meeting and commit to that for 12 more months, while we hadn't gotten any movement whatsoever from the partners on the board to take any action on this budget. What we were told is there's no time to fix any of this year. We just need to work on it next year. Well, that's the same thing we've been told the year before and the year before and the year before. We felt after those meetings that we felt like we were pushed in the corner and said, we're just going to take that money and we'll work on this, I promise again. So at our May 9th council meeting, I reported from the board, Alan reported from the finance side of things, the dire straits that we're in, and I advised the board that I need a decision. As I go back to these meetings to represent the city, I need to be able to tell them truly what our plans are financially. The decision was made to put this on the agenda for this coming week's agenda to notice of our withdrawal of Slovisa if we choose to vote that way tonight. That simply notices, or sorry, UPD, sorry, it's synonymous in my mind now. To simply withdraw. There is an interlocal agreement that contemplates withdrawal, and there's a huge window in between. One says that if you've been there for 5 years, with 12 months' notice, you can take your assets with you. The other says if there's a member entity that doesn't pay their bill in 30 days, they're automatically out. And in between, both attorneys, the UPD attorney confirmed this with me yesterday, that in between, the two parties can agree to anything. The message that I was instructed to deliver to the Finance Committee yesterday was that we have a firm line of July 1st. We're not going to just hand over $5 million for a year and hope that it gets better. We're willing to look at anything in between. We feel that there's a number of different scenarios where we can have a transition that works for everyone. I must have said it half a dozen times, but as you can see, the emotional response was pretty high. So we took a step back. We talked to a few people afterwards who were a little more cool-headed. Chief Mazurn was one of them. I thank you for your comments today. It was consistent with yesterday, while some of the others aren't. And that's what we hope, is that from this point forward, as we look at an exit, that truly they will come to the table and work with us on a smooth transition over a period of time. However, if we meet the kind of threats and vitriol that we got yesterday, we're prepared to do it July 1st for the betterment of Herriman. So we do not continue to pay for what we don't get and continue to be bullied. We have planned over a period of time for that contingency. It's not ideal. We don't want to do it that way. But if they force us to, we're prepared to.
All right. So I want to start out, I took a lot of notes. I had the opportunity of watching a city council meeting online last week, and we learned that we tend to repeat ourselves as we all talk, so I'll try very hard to avoid repeating what Councilman Henderson has already said. But there are a couple things I want to specifically address. First off, there was a question that was asked by one of our, well, first off, I want to say this. I want to make it clear that in my mind and in the mind of the council, this decision is an administrative decision that has nothing to do with the officers that are in our precinct, with the officers of UPD, and with the service that those individual officers provide to us on a daily basis. Those officers are all heroes. I was lucky enough to be in Washington, D.C. this week for Police Week, and was at the fallen law enforcement officers memorial that the Vice President and the President spoke at this last week. I have no doubt in my mind that there is not a law enforcement officer in the state of Utah that would not drop everything that they are doing to protect a life, regardless of what city it's in. I want to share two quick examples of that. On January 20th, when we had one of our officers shot at, well, two of our officers shot at, and a resident in the area that was shot in the chest twice. I found out about that when I woke up and there were two Sandy City police cars outside my window with their lights on, helping lock down the area. It was not a unified police department. It was not a Herriman Police Department. It was a law enforcement officer, and it didn't matter who it came from, because on my way to City Hall, I passed Layton. I passed Unified Police Department. I passed Utah Highway Patrol. I passed every single organization that provided service in this valley, showed up to our city because there was an emergency, and not a single one of them was going to stand by why somebody was in danger. So I want to make it very clear to both the officers in our precinct, as well as all officers in UPD and in the valley, this has nothing to do with the individual officers and the services that they provide. They are heroes in my mind, they are heroes in the mind of this council, and we will continue to support them in any way we can. I also want to say that after this information was released, the first conversation that I had with Sheriff Rivera was last night. There is always going to be an emotional reaction, and I'm always going to allow the benefit of the doubt with that emotional reaction, because it's always hard when things change. The response I got the first time I talked to the sheriff yesterday was, regardless of what decision we have to make and what we choose to make, that the Unified Police Department and the Sheriff's Office of Salt Lake County will be here in our community as needed, and they will make sure our residents are safe with no gap in coverage. While emotions may get high in a meeting, I have no doubt that that will continue to be the case. I take Sheriff Rivera at her word at that, and I have given my word that we will continue to work with them as well. So for those that are concerned about a gap in safety or gap in coverage, there is no doubt in my mind that that will not exist, because those law enforcement officers are going to continue to provide service in our community. So with that out of the way, there's a couple of things I do want to address, keeping in mind that this is an administrative issue. Somebody made a comment about will 5 officers make the difference in how safe our city is? The answer to that, in my opinion, is absolutely yes. The response time to our residents is critical. Our precinct also serves Copperton. And prior to our current police chief, we were having times where there was 1 officer on duty for the entire precinct, which is one of the largest precincts geographically in the state, definitely in the valley and definitely within UPD. That is not acceptable in my mind, ever. Now, has that occurred recently? No, because our new police chief has made it clear that if he has to be here at 2 o'clock in the morning to make sure that there is always backup for our officers, he will be here. But
And he has.
And he has. And so has our lieutenant. Our executives here in this precinct will be here so that there is always backup and that our residents are protected. It is on us as a body, as a board, to make sure that we are cognizant of that and providing the services and the resources necessary to allow that coverage to be here, whether it be through constant manning or having additional officers. In my personal opinion, and I believe in the opinion of the board, we have not been able to achieve that. And if that requires paying more money to our officers so that we can get more officers here, I am willing to do that. That is one of our roles as a board, and I will pay our officers top dollar if that's what it takes to have the coverage here that we need. And with the overpay that we feel that we've had, we can easily do that and still come in at a savings. So can we pay those officers more? Will it possibly cost more per officer? Absolutely. I do also want to, shifting to the equipment. Councilman Henderson mentioned that if, per the interlocal agreement, if we have been with a Unified Police Department for 5 years and give 1 year of notice, that equipment is ours. The trucks are ours, the guns are ours, the computers are ours. It stays here in our community because we paid for them. One of the meetings that Councilman Henderson spoke about, we expressed one of the concerns that we had, that we had ordered several police vehicles several years ago. Those police vehicles were never ordered. We paid for them twice because we had to pay for them up front and then we had to pay the depreciation on them. We have paid for them essentially twice. They were never ordered. The response that we got back in that meeting, and maybe this was a communication issue more than anything else, was, well, if we just give you the trucks, will you be happy? The answer to that is no, we want our money back. And that was the response that was given. When I got back from Washington, D.C. last week, we had 4 trucks in our parking lot. Those trucks were not the new trucks that we paid for. Those trucks were trucks that are surplus, basically. They're being surplused out. Yes, are they sitting in our precinct now? Absolutely. Are they the brand new police vehicles that we paid for twice? They are not. And I cannot, in good conscience, continue to pay taxpayer money to an organization that does not give us the things that we are already paying for. This is not a new issue. 2 years ago when I ran for city council, I spoke out against Slovisa because I did not like the way that we were paying for things we were not getting. When I ran for city council, or when I ran for mayor this last year, I once again reaffirmed my belief that the Slovisa funding mechanism was not going to work for our community. We had the opportunity to leave that organization, but when we did that, we did not receive the control that we needed in order to be able to provide the resources to our officers that they require to do the job and to allow our residents to have the lifestyle that they expect and the safety that they deserve. As far as public notice is concerned, this is the first step. Yes, this has been a very quiet process up to this point. I have spoken out against the council many times in the past about transparency. And do I feel in this case that I am in some ways guilty of not being transparent? Absolutely. I understand that. I understand the concern. At the same time, this is the start of the process. This is not the end of the process. And so we are here now opening up everything that we can to make it as transparent as possible so that all residents can participate in that process. If there are residents that are watching online, I would encourage you to email us your comments and concerns, because we will happily listen to each and every resident that wants to participate in this conversation. Whether or not it's your first time to comment on an issue in the city or it's your 50th time. We are here to listen because we answer to our residents. However, we have a fiduciary responsibility to spend the dollars of our taxpayers wisely. That doesn't mean that we can just decide what we want to do. We are legally required to do what is in the best interest of our community. And I cannot justify spending an extra $2 million a year when we can't even get the officers here. I can justify spending an extra couple $100,000 a year to pay our officers more so that we have the officers on our streets. So that's where I stand. There's many other things that I could talk about. As I wrap up my comments, when I spoke to the sheriff, one of the things that I said to her is that I want to continue to help Unified Police Department work through the issues that we have with the model and with the funding and with the questions that we have. Not necessarily because that will change the direction that the city is headed at this point, but because it is our responsibility to work with them as partners. They will continue to be our partners. They have been for a long time. And I don't want UPD to be in a situation where they lose any more than they do through this change because we weren't willing to help them. We want all municipalities that participate, all the contract cities, to be able to work through any issues that they may have. And I hope, as I believe the board would agree with me, that this is the catalyst that will help those other organizations and those other cities as well.
If I may just pigtail on that a little bit. It's actually something that has gone into our decision-making process over the last several weeks, especially culminating in the financial decision, the deadline that we have coming up, was that we looked at it as, look, we have done our homework, we've gone down this road, we've prepared for it, we've had public meetings, we've done all things, we're ready to do this, but the other partners in UPD are not. If we were to drag this on longer, we've already seen it, we're actually afraid it would make things worse rather than better. We feel that by a quick exit, separating our finances, they can continue to work on some of the issues that the other partners have, but they clearly don't have the same ones we have, or they're not as important. So, if I may.
No, I appreciate it. The last thing that I'll say is that while you've heard I'm sorry, it's not time for comment at this time. I'm sorry, there's no time, we cannot have comment at this time. It's time for the council to speak. The last thing that I would like to say is that we've talked about this July 1st deadline, and I want to reiterate what Councilman Henderson said as well. I spoke with the sheriff, and she is reassured that they're going to work with us if we choose to make this transition. Right now, we're just making notice. That can still change. I personally don't expect my decision to change, but it can, and I will listen to anybody that wants to talk to me about it. I am personally willing to work with UPD and the UPD board to find a time frame that works for both organizations. If that means, that in our best interest we have to leave it July 1st, we will, but I'm also willing to push that deadline back as long as that agreement has been reached before July 1st, so that not only does our precinct receive the coverage that they need, but that Unified has the opportunity to go and backfill, that they can work with their member communities as well to handle the finances, to handle the loss in officers, whatever it might be. So I'm willing to do that, and it sounds at this point that the board and the sheriff is willing to do that as well. So this is just the beginning of a process. We're going to work through it together. Ultimately, the most important part to me is that our residents will continue to be protected by the officers that either are here or choose to come here, regardless of what organization they work for.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Other comments?
Sure. I guess I will echo about the appreciation for UPD. There was a lot of emotional comments tonight about appreciating the service that's been rendered, and I echo those. We appreciate it has nothing to do with the service of the officers, but again, it has everything to do with not getting what the taxpayers are paying for. As far as the public process, I know myself, I have been part of public meetings. A lot of them would be work meetings or general city council meetings, but they're all recorded and all available. But there was several comments tonight about this is my first meeting. And my concern would be is if it was your first meeting for this, or is this your first meeting that you've ever even watched or listened to, those types of things. So there has been numerous times that these types of issues have been discussed about the concerns all the way back, like was mentioned through Savisa. So they have been, and it's difficult because what you really hire us to do is to make sure we're understanding these kind of things, because most people, and I'll just put my resident hat on, I didn't have time to go to these, so I elected somebody that would go through and find out the details, sit in those meetings, have all the extra meetings, go sit on the boards, do all those kinds of things to gather all that information. So there is multiple times that things get discussed that the consensus of it is brought then to the public meeting so that you can have an understanding of it. And I can tell you that that's what happens. I can tell you for sure that I've watched Jared's notes. He takes very good notes, and he puts forth a lot of effort being the representative on that board for us. So he's doing that. The homework is getting done. I was a little bit concerned about a comment that was made about a grenade going off in the budget if Herriman removes, which is a little bit confusing to me because it's my understanding that we pay into something with the anticipation of having, that's our portion of it. So if we pay $10 towards something, that's because when it's calculated out, that's how much our portion is. And so if we remove our portion of it, the cost should also be removed. So it doesn't make any sense to me that there would be a grenade go off on a budget, because all we're simply doing is saying you would no longer have to provide our services and we're going to withdraw our funds. So it shouldn't have a dramatic effect on the budget unless for some reason some of our money is subsidizing other cities. So that was a little bit confusing to me. When the comment was made about, Jared talked about policing, so not just response to calls, but actual patrolling and policing and just driving around, just making sure crazy things aren't happening. And I can tell you, just in my own area that I live, I watch neighbors post on our little neighborhood Facebook thing all the time. Many times a week, unfortunately. Hey, look what my camera caught. Hey, look what, they have those little doorbell things and all this security type of thing. Look what this caught, look what this caught. And so our community is actually helping to do that policing, which I encourage, which is great. But in actuality, they're also paying for that service that they're simply not receiving. And then constant manning has been an interesting terminology for me. I need you to understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but constant manning is talking about overtime. So constant manning is asking for officers who I deeply respect, who are working their buns off, and who have a very high-stress job. And then we're saying, now to fill these positions, you have to come in and work some more hours. And so constant manning hours, I question if 1 hour equals 1 hour. So if you're asking this police officer who's worked very hard and is probably tired and in a high-stress job to come in and put in another full hour, that's tough for them to give a whole full hour if they were just coming in at a refreshed rate. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's just, I just don't think you get equal on that. Not because the police officer isn't good, but just because you tax them with so much additional stress by asking so many additional hours. So the constant manning is concerning to me when we're getting a lot of our police force, well, 30%, but we're not actually getting enough. So those are just some of my questions. A lot of the things I would just repeat if I repeated them. But I had a kind of stern conversation with the Arts Council last week. They wanted an $8,000 budget increase approved. And gosh, we talked to them for 45 minutes saying, you have to justify this. You have to show me this. You don't just get this extra money, because every dollar that comes is coming out of somebody's pocket. When we're talking about $1 to $2 million, I don't know, you think about your own personal budgets, that's a lot of money. And every single one of those dollars is coming out of somebody's pocket. Maybe somebody that's not putting food on their table. And so I just don't see that how we can be asked and be financially responsible and say that it's okay to throw those money away for, pay for something that we're simply not getting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, I have a few. If you'll please indulge me and allow me a chance to make a few comments. I will try not to be repetitive of those good points that have already been made by council members tonight. I do very much appreciate the decorum that has been shown by all tonight as we talk about a highly emotional issue, honestly. And I applaud you for the way that each of you have been here and presented yourself and approached this issue tonight. I will not applaud loudly since we know that that is not allowed in this room. So, to add on to that, I also very much appreciate the way that the sheriff has approached this issue tonight and her comments and a willingness to continue to be partners and to work through these issues. I very much appreciate that, again, in a very difficult situation. Mayor Silvestrini, appreciate you being here as a representative of the UPD board for the comments that you have made, for your passionate plea. There's some concerns I have, honestly, you know, as far as possible timing of that. And I'll touch on those a minute later, but I do appreciate your words and, again, your professional manner in which you approached us this evening. I want to touch just a little bit, just for, I guess, information. There's been a lot that is talked about the UPD board tonight, and I want to talk about real quickly the makeup of the UPD board and how that relates to our city and the decisions that we make. The UPD board, again, is governed by elected officials that represent all of the entities that receive service through UPD. Jared, make sure you correct me if I misspeak here. Currently, that board consists of 13 members.
Correct.
And there are 2 representatives from the county council, 5 representatives from local townships, and 6 representatives from the other municipalities that receive services from the UPD. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about...
Sorry, just to clarify kind of a funding issue. The cities pay, as Alan described, a budgeted amount. We pay what they tell us we're supposed to pay under the budget. The, I don't want to say unincorporated townships and the county are under Slovisa still. So their funding is under one umbrella, while the cities pay separately.
But I think, to be fair, there is a couple of cities that are under the Slovisa umbrella as well. Is that correct?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Not anymore.
It
was Herriman and Riverton, and both separated for.
Both separate. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Regardless, to get back to how that affects us as we basically engage with that organization and the financial decisions that are made there. Yes, there is a representation of Herriman on that board, but we are only one vote amongst 13. And so, even though we may go in there and express our concerns over certain items and certain budgeting, again, at the end of the day, if the other members vote in favor of that budget, we are simply stuck with it. We have no recourse, essentially, at that point to come back and refigure or rehash that proposed budget with UPD. And so the reason I say that is because there's been the issue of local control that is brought up. And though there are certainly circumstances where I agree a regional approach to some type of services is appropriate, there has to be an element of local control in there. And in my opinion, more than just one vote for an entity, especially when it comes to the larger issues of budget. And if we don't agree with the budget, then what is the process for us to be able to go back and sit down and talk about those issues? Again, if everyone else is in agreement with that, and it may be, a larger majority of the cities don't agree, or a larger majority of those that represent the unincorporated areas of the county or the townships that don't agree, It simply gives us no resource on the local control aspect of that. And I do believe that there is something to be said about local control, and about making those decisions at the ground where they truly affect the people in that area. And we've been tasked with making decisions representative of our residents' desires. And at the top of that is always public safety. And so I think local control is something that needs to be talked about in the larger picture of how we're represented on the UPD board. No one has to go far to recognize that we are a rapidly growing city, probably experiencing more growth in our area, definitely experiencing more growth in Herriman in comparison to the other members of UPD. Now, the challenges come, again, as I've brought up one point already, is with new growth comes new dollars. Now, how do we make sure that those new dollars are spent within our community? Because this is where we're experiencing that new growth, and we need to find a way to make sure that those tax dollars stay here. And I have some questions if that's truly happening. The other side of that is as a larger organization of UPD, we've heard, and I realize that there are law enforcement officer shortages all over the place. But as a rapidly growing city, the current organizational structure, in my opinion, is not able to keep up with the demand of our community. And that falls directly onto the elected officials to find out a fix, a way to help keep up with the demand of growth in our area. I know one of the nationally accepted ways of looking at law enforcement in the community, not saying that's how we do it here, but it's one that is used widely out there, is an officer per 1,000 in terms of population. And if you look at the last, I don't have it right in front of me, Jared, so you might have to correct me if I'm wrong, but at the last costing exhibit that talked about officer per 1,000, we are down around 0.83 current officers per 1,000. Again, not saying that that is a standard that anyone has said that we are going to meet, but I think it's one that is, again, talked about quite a bit, and one that is addressed, and I think kind of, you can correct me if I'm wrong even, Sheriff, one that I think that they try and use to kind of meet in this organization. There are areas, and let me clarify, that 0.83 is including those open allocations. That's not filled allocations, that's including all total allocations. There are
allocations is number of officers, that's it.
And number of officers, thank you. And there are areas within UPD service area that is higher than us, in fact, over the 1 per 1,000 ratio. So I have a concern about the ability, again, and the structure of the organization to meet the growing demands of our community moving forward. Transparency. You've heard that word a lot tonight, and there is obviously a huge expectation of the residents for transparency of their local elected officials, and I think, is there always room for improvement? Absolutely. But I think we've done a very good job, especially when it comes to matters of financial and the budget here, of being transparent. That same expectation for me goes to every one of the partners that we deal with in transparency. And you have actually heard tonight that they recognize that there's issues with transparency when it comes to the budget, and have vowed to work on that. And I think that that is tremendous, and I think we should be part of that conversation moving forward. The question really then to me is how long are we willing to wait for that transparency to get there? Because again, you've heard it expressed that our concerns have been expressed over some time, and we haven't gotten to that level of transparency yet. So how long is one vote on this council am I willing to wait, and at what cost? And that's something that I have to continue to wrestle through. But again, I don't think that the level of expectation should be any different for our partners as it is for the members of the council and what is expected of our residents. And again, I will continue to push for that level of transparency from myself, from the members of the council, and from all of our partners every step of the way. A couple of other quick points. Sherry, you touched on this a little bit, and it was to the comment of the effect that our potential withdrawal will have to the partners of the other partners in UPD. And I guess the part that is concerning for me over the current model is that we've heard tonight that this will have a potential substantial effect on our partners. And that is not our goal. Our goal is not to affect our partners. In fact, our goal is to continue to have a working relationship with our partners. That is very important. It's paramount, especially when it comes to public safety. So our goal is not to affect our partners. Our goal is to protect the interests of our community and of our residents. And so when I hear that our potential withdrawal will have a monumental or substantial effect on the partners, again, I have to go back and I have to question the model that exists. To Sherry's point, I understand the concept of pooled services, and I know that there is some shared cost there. But our decision, again, that local control and a decision that we have available to us at any time to make to withdraw from the UPD organization, in my mind, should not have a substantial of effect on the remaining partners as we are being told it will have. Granted, when you're talking pooled services, there is going to be some, and I realize that. But again, I haven't been able to get to a level of clarity and transparency on that whole pooled services model to understand why it has such a substantial effect. Based on the information that has been provided to us, and again, you've heard now from Councilman Henderson about the multiple asks for some of this information, based on the level of information that I have received thus far, I can't make it add up. And that's what I've been asked to do, is to make it add up, to watch out for every tax dollar that is being spent. And I'm trying to do that. I'm not going to, timing, again, I too, I do not want to do anything to harm the service that is provided to our residents. But I have to obviously look at the financial aspect of that. Again, this would be a vote to begin a process. I do have concerns over a potential very rapid startup. I don't think that's good in the long run for us, for UPD, for our partners. And so I appreciated the comments of looking at taking some time to work through those issues and make sure that we do this the right way should we proceed down that road. And again, I would be in favor of that. The last thing is the mention of constant manning. I come from the public safety world. I've worked in public safety for many years. I feel like I have a good understanding of municipal budgets. I have responsibility over running a large component of a municipal budget. And I understand that there are vacancies that are created from time to time, and that constant manning is a way to help cover that until we can get those bodies replaced. It's one that I've been a part of and utilized myself, and it's also, and I believe the main intent for constant manning uses a mechanism to cover sick and vacation leave to maintain a base level of service. What I do know, having worked in it, is that constant manning is not a sustainable model to fill open vacancies. It is meant as a short-term fix to a problem, again, to maintain a baseline level of service. It is not a sustainable model moving forward. And though we recognize that some of the dollars have been spent towards constant manning to fill that, one of the main things that I come back to is the fact of these open allocations and how long they have lingered on. Are we going to have 100% success filling those allocations if we go to our own model? We know it's going to be challenging. We absolutely recognize it's going to be challenging. I can't answer for a certainty whether we will or won't. But I do recognize that there are challenges out there. But I do know that we have to do something. We have to do something to protect the tax dollar of our residents, to bring that baseline service up to an acceptable level that is constant in our community. That is our job. It's one of the essential functions, I believe, of the elected officials. The comment was made is, has the shortage affected security of our city? And I will echo the mayor's comments. I absolutely believe that it has. Have the calls gone unanswered? I don't believe that they have gone unanswered. Do we know what the response in time to those has been? We can get that data, but do we believe that having more officers on the street would decrease that time? I think that would be a reasonable given for us all to conclude. But I do believe that running short has potentially compromised security. It hasn't allowed us the opportunity to be proactive in our policing. In a lot of respects, it's only allowed us the opportunity to be reactive. And being reactive does not ultimately provide for a safe community. And that's what I'm striving for. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Thank the council members for their comments. Appreciate the public for your comments as well. So at this time,
I just want to make the motion. I never get to make a motion.
Calm down. So at this time, I would accept a motion for anyone willing to make one. Mayor?
So I would like to make a motion. I move to approve the resolution number R28-2018, directing staff to provide a notice of withdrawal to the Unified Police Department.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. We'll take a roll call vote. Mayor Watts?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Orrin?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That motion passes. All right, that leads us to our last item, calendar. We have upcoming our Planning Commission on May 17th at 7 p.m. We've got a special City Council work meeting on June 6th at 5 p.m. with our regular following meeting at 7 p.m. We invite you to our upcoming events as listed on the agenda. We have a very important Herriman Community Suicide Prevention meeting that is on May 17th at 6 o'clock. Pedalpalooza on the 19th, Memorial Day breakfast on the 28th, and then Fort Herriman Days and our rodeo on June 1st and 2nd. Do we need a closed session? Okay, so we need a closed session, so I'll accept a motion.
I will make a motion to temporarily recess the City Council meeting to convene in a closed session for the purpose to discuss pending and reasonable imminent litigation and the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property as provided by Utah Code annotated 52-4-205.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Let's take a vote on that. I'll say aye. I don't know who.
All's in favor?
All in favor, thank you. Aye.
It's a roll call.
Oh, it's a roll call. Roll call. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Orrin.
Yes.
Mayor Watts.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
And I vote yes, so that motion passes.
That's weird. Thank you.
So what's our effective date? There's a blank in there.